Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everyday Legends podcast. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and today I'm very excited to bring you an episode with a guest that I greatly admire, respect, have followed their work, just absorbed myself in a chunk of their work, not all of it, as you'll hear in this podcast, for quite some time now, and that is a wonderful woman by the name of Alison Armstrong. If you haven't consumed or come across any of her work on men, on women, on understanding men, on understanding women, on partnership, on being in sync with the opposite sex, on celebrating partnership, those are some of the titles. I strongly suggest you do. If you're a man wanting to understand more about yourself and relationships and women, go. If you're a gay man and you want to understand more about men and relationships, go. If you're a woman and you want to understand more about yourself and relationships and men, go. But listen to this, and this will give you a really, really beautiful insight. So how do I describe Alison beyond being the smiliest, most bubbliest person I think I've ever interacted with? This is what legitimately happened for me at the end of this podcast. I finished recording. I left my office. I went out into the kitchen to get a drink, and I noticed my cheeks were sore from smiling. And part of that was because I was enjoying myself, but also part of it was because I was reciprocating unconsciously how incredibly smiley and open and bubbly she was, and my cheeks sore from smiling for that basically hour-long conversation. Alison is, I'm going to read a little bit of her bio because I think this is going to really bring things into focus, and use the words that really they've put together to describe her best. It says, Alison Armstrong's exploration of human behavior began in 1991 with her decision to study men. Quote, to find out how I was bringing out the worst in them and hopefully how to bring out the best. Her success in understanding men naturally led to studying women's behavior and making vital connections between the two. As her work evolved over the decades, Alison now illuminates human characteristics that precede and express themselves regardless of gender, age, and upbringing. She distinguishes normal human instincts that compel both men and women to behave in ways that contradict and undermine our own purposes, goals, values, needs, and relationships. Besides fulfilling the need to understand why people behave as they do, Alison offers practical, partnership-based alternatives through all of the amazing ways in which she does that. Alison is a sought-after speaker and thought leader amongst people with the desire to live empowered lives. Her philosophy and approach are referenced and taught by authors, speakers, business consultants, and therapists, and coaches and dudes like me. It was a joy to speak with Alison. I was a little bit fanboy in there. I also listened to the end because if you're a Kiwi or perhaps you're Aussies or you know Kiwis, you're going to enjoy an extremely colloquial term that I teach Alison. But between now and that very funny, I think, piece at the end, we speak so much about man and woman, about understanding our instincts, about, women's focus on having their feelings hurt, not having their feelings hurt, as opposed to men not really caring about that, but more focus on being disrespected. All these nuances about, like women emasculating men, men's role in this, the quest for power, all these kind of things, dynamics in ourselves, the instinct and the animal that's in us. And also I ask her a question around if she were to have a say in education of children around relationships, what would she bring into there? It's a fascinating conversation. I have so many questions that I didn't even get to. She's already invited me. She said we're going to do it again. So I'm like, I'll take you up on that. Let me know how you receive this, if you enjoy it, how it benefits you, what you've taken from it. As always, I hope you get something from this. I trust you will. Alison is an absolute well of knowledge and wisdom. I had so much enjoyment. Whatever. I enjoyed this conversation a lot. I trust you will too. As always, pass this on to someone. Remember, these podcasts grow by you passing them on. Do us a favor, a huge favor, please. Pass it on. Click subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Give us a review. It helps us get this in front of more men who could use it, who could benefit from it, who could step into becoming an everyday legend in your lives. All right, onto the show. Alison, welcome to the Everyday Legends podcast. It is such an honor and a privilege to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for thinking that. I'm glad to be here.
So I'm very eager to dive in, and I've got lots of questions, and I've been making sure I don't try and load too many questions on. But I do, I think a lot of the people that listen to me might have come across your work. I've certainly shared plenty of it and referenced it, but some people might be new, and I don't want to do too much of the Alison Armstrong story. But I do remember when I was introduced to your work. It was a good friend of mine had said, something along the lines of, "You got to read this book." I think it was one of your audio pieces. And I was listening to it. I think it was the Amazing Development of Men. And, I remember a lot of, what I call them, light bulbs. There were, a lot of these things that were like, of course. And, maybe thoughts that had been there in a form, but they became so well formed in your words. And a lot of it landed so easily. And, working with me, and so much of it made sense. I think, seen and understood. And I'm sure that's probably feedback that you've heard many times in the past. What I'm interested in, we can go into all of the work, and I really do want to, but how did you get to, I suppose, that place, first of all, of actually like going into this work around understanding men, women, relationships? What was the journey that took you there, the drive for it?
Okay. I have a question though. Have
Please.
you listened to The Queen's Code?
No.
Okay. So what
But
happens?
I have done a list of the others, but The Queen's Code I have not. I've been called out.
Well,
Yes.
I would encourage you to get the audiobook,
Okay.
which you can only get at our site and then listen on our app.
Cool. We'll link it.
But I read the story, and it's fiction because, in my observation as an educator for decades now, 40, more than 40 years as an educator, I don't like self-help books. I don't like people telling me what I should do. I like stories, right? Preferably with werewolves and horses in them.
Yep.
and so I learned early on, trying to teach my sister-in-law about that he had become a king, and
Right.
the stages of development, and the way she was treating him wasn't going to fly anymore. And she was just blowing me off.
Right.
And then I stopped and I started telling her a story. And she stopped and started listening. And even when her husband came to pick us up, she's like, shh, Allison's got to finish this story. And like, okay. At that point, I'd been studying men since 1991. It started when a colleague of mine was called a frog farmer in front of about 120 people, men and women. And what's that? And
yes.
and the man's name is Herb Tanzer, and he said, some women turn frogs into princes. You, my dear, turn princes into frogs. And when he said that, I'm giving you the very short version. When he said that, my life flashed before me.
Right.
It's a farmhouse, big white farmhouse with a wraparound porch, and I'm standing in the front steps, and there's hundreds of frogs in front of me with little human heads. And there was my ex-husband and my ex-boyfriend since my ex-husband, and then all the 10-day relationships I'd had before that. And yeah, and a lot of women, when they find out about frog farming, they get mad, right? They're just like, you're just putting it all on women. What's really the fault of men? And I was ecstatic. I was ecstatic that I tried to change men. I tried to change my first husband. I tried to change every man I'd ever been with, and without success at all, always failing. And if I was doing something to bring out the worst in men, that was good news. Do you know, the alternative to that I was bringing out the worst in them is that they're awful. They're awful, and I thought they were con artists, and my job was to poke the bear as much as I could and reveal the beast before I fell in love again. And I always loved men. I had my first boyfriend when I was 7. but nobody told me they're different. Nobody
Right.
told me to not expect them to act like me, to think like me, to connect like me. Nobody said that. My mother just taught me how to emasculate men. And talk about a frog farmer, my poor mom. And so there's this weird part of my life that I've started to tell the truth about since I recorded the audiobook of the Queen's Code. And that is, I used to think I was brilliant, and that these questions would just pop into my head from my brilliant brain. Do you know, that's like my father's brain and my grandfather's brain. And isn't it just lucky me? Well, I finally started to recognize I'm actually very guided. I'm guided by higher consciousness. And in that moment, the question that popped into my head was, what if men are responding to women? So I started, what if it wasn't, I didn't set out to prove men are responding to women.
Yeah.
It was a question. So I found out all these ways that men are responding to women and all these ways that they're not.
Right.
And, you know, the Amazing Development of Men, both the first and second edition, describe the ways that men are not responding to women. The ways that they are being compelled by something other. And they've got to do what they've got to do. And we can sync up with it and be empowering to men, support them, be cherished by them, have them willingly go to bat for us, live for us, die for us. Or we can keep trying to get them to act like women, which doing that to a man is, it's disrespectful. And women don't understand why disrespect is horrible to a man. We're like, oh, I'm disrespected all the time. It's not a big deal for me. Okay, honey, but how about when your feelings are hurt? Well, my feelings are hurt. My reaction's completely justifiable when my feelings are hurt, but he was just disrespected. You should get over it. He is stupid. Right? Like, so, yeah. There's this, you can get it, right?
Yes.
Instead of, and you know, a trait in my family, my dad and my grandfather are both engineers, is wanting to find out how things work, take it apart, look at it, right? My dad was basically every kind of engineer you could be. And he really was. I mean, he was a mechanical engineer. He was an aeronautical engineer.
Wow.
He drove race cars. He raced everything that could be raced ever. And he engineered it all. And so making sense of things, it's a compulsion to make sense. And so, you know, one of the books, the only nonfiction that I ever published is called Making Sense of Men. And so that's what happened. But because of who I thought men are, I thought it would take 2 or 3 months to learn everything worth knowing about you.
Right. Yeah, we're simple creatures, of course.
That was February of 1991.
Right.
And
this was said to your colleague, by the way, the frog farmer.
Yeah, she stood up in a group of people and asked, why are men wonderful in the beginning?
Right.
And it was a whole long sentence and went on and ended with, and then they turn into sports watching, beer belching, pizza eating, couch slugs. Why is that?
And so, I feel like a spot as a fly on the wall in the room after that line was delivered that you, my dear, are a frog farmer.
Yeah. Well, there was a
yeah, I
right?
gasp, I imagine. The ear was sucked out of the room.
And you know, with her attack, the men crossed their legs.
Right.
I'm not exaggerating. The men in the audience, I could see out of the corner of my eye, they were crossing their legs. And then when Herb responded and said that, the women were like, oh, right? Like to blame a woman for how men behave, right? And oh my gosh, it was the best news ever. I wanted to know, what was I doing? Because I had all these frogs, but I didn't know what I did to have them be that way. And I happened, because we're often much better with men we're not romantically involved with, right? We're the most horrid and reactive to the men we are romantically involved with. But I ran a nonprofit organization. And so I was what today would be called a coach to 3 single entrepreneurs. And I was their sounding board. I was their cheerleader. I was the one that, acknowledged them and held them to account. And so those 3 men became my first men. And when we started our workshop 4 years later, they were there. They were there to answer women's questions, because I realized I didn't know all the answers. Even after 4 years, I didn't know everything that could be asked. And we started the workshop. We started the workshop because I wanted to transform the way women related to men. And I knew I didn't know enough yet. And so through our workshops, I basically, what I had to find out, Mike, was all the things that trigger women to emasculate men, to steal your power, all the ways that we cut your legs out from underneath you, subtle and not subtle, practically invisible, some like, just cancers growing in the bloodstream, some just outright shoot you, stab you. So I defined out all the things that had us do it, all the ways that we did it, and then all the reasons we justified it.
Right.
That you deserve to have your power stolen from you because. Oh, it was amazing. I talked to women one-on-one for those. It was 3.5 years, because it was 6 months into studying men that I was called on emasculating men.
Yeah.
But only woman who had the life I wanted. I wouldn't have listened to anybody but her. And she called me out. And I'd become better at emasculating men from learning about them. I now knew how you were the most sensitive, and I hit hard.
Right.
It was terrible. I became more manipulative.
Why do you think that was?
I was hurt.
Yeah.
I was angry, and I was terrified. Terrified, which is what most women have, all 3. Y'all have no idea how sensitive we are to you, how much we think our lives depend upon you liking us, you being pleased with us. It's very primitive, and we resent that we think we can't live without you, that we'll die without you. And if you don't, if you're not pleased with me, you'll just let me be hurt. You won't protect me. That's what we're afraid of, because we don't understand men. And so
does that create I suppose a sense of internal conflict with, I know you talk about the human animal, the human spirit, right? Like these things are innate, and then this idea of like pleasing men, like, there's a big message, of course, that is a very, very wrong thing, and then any sort of dependence and so on. Like, were you seeing a lot of that perhaps internally, but then also in women, that you were like, there's this internal conflict there, the push-pull almost?
Well, yes. And it's huge, mostly because we think it's personal. What's wrong with me that I'm such a people pleaser? There's nothing wrong with you. You're human. We're herd animals. You're the smaller and weaker sex. We have depended upon men to protect and provide for us for millennia. You think that's going to go away because you got a job? Because you finally have your own credit? Because you can buy a house now, when before you were property that was bought and sold, right? It's so new. Our current reality is so new. We're not even 150 years past being property in first world countries. Our fathers, and then our husbands, and if we didn't have a husband, our brothers could do whatever they wanted with us for the betterment of the family. They could literally sell us off to the highest bidder. And it was part of culture. It was part of the culture. And so all these things and not understanding that how primitive that is. And most men would not subscribe to that now. I don't have a right to do that. You know, they might make an argument for it, but they are not going to be that way. And so yeah, it's so deeply installed. It's in every cell of our limbic nervous system. We have an entire nervous system dedicated to surviving. And we survive either by pleasing you, or we survive by dominating you. And we don't really know anything else. We don't, I mean, my passion is partnership, being on the same team, you know, playing to each other's strengths, working it out together, right? That's really the point of all of my work, even though I don't always use that word. And right? Even
it's a great word, though. I think I align with it personally, but also in my work. Of course, partnerships. And I know individually, I've always, you know, not necessarily had the words internally, which was like a teammate, right? And I'm a male, and there's all the pieces that we can speak to around, you know, teammates and being able to depend on others. But also, I'm an individual who grew up playing team sports and experienced the stuff and trust and dependability and all these on others so much. When it came to someone who I was going to let into the closest elements of my life, it's such an innate thing, I think, the idea of a teammate.
I think it is, and I think it's one of the most important things a man can know about himself and a woman can know about a man. My husband of 26 years, who passed away 4 years ago, he didn't do team sports. He didn't put himself in a position of working in teams. He had a staff. He was the boss. He had bosses he reported to, right? Very hierarchical. And so,
which is common.
It's quite common. But someone who does know team, right? And my boyfriend is one of them. He's played team sports since he was 4 years old. He's played hockey and was a hockey coach. And some of the things with him are so much easier because he has that point of view that, and women don't understand this, by the way. They think of alpha males. And if you're not an alpha male, which we think of as the strongest, and so we're supposed to have one of those, we don't know that there are so many men who don't want the accountability of the quarterback. They don't want that accountability. They want a role that matters to the quarterback. They want a role that matters to the team, that them doing it well, winning depends upon it. And it's acknowledged. We couldn't have done that without you. They don't have to be top dog. And there's so many wonderful, I hesitate to use the word healthy, but it's right there. Wonderful, healthy men who have no interest in being the so-called leader. But that doesn't mean they're not leading. They're leading in their realm. And that's one of the things that y'all taught me, that there's things that are important enough to you for you to need to lead it. And there are other things that are not important to you. So why would you lead it? And I remember one woman talking about all these things that her husband generates, but she wanted to go to the opera and he wouldn't lift a finger. Like, and who is the opera important to? Me. There you have your answer. If you let him know how much it would matter to you if he generated this for you and you really appreciated him for that, he would do it for you, but he still won't care about the opera.
He cares about you because you care about the opera.
Right. And, you know, like in the Queen's Code, the metaphor, which is also so common, is taking out the trash. right? Women expect men to take out the trash because I'm a girl and it's dirty and ugly and icky and it should be your job. Talk about prejudice, right? And then so they say, you know, I need you to be the one that takes out the trash. Okay, just tell me when you want me to take it out. If I have to tell you when it needs to be taken out, I might as well take it out myself. And I have to have them understand. Well, he wants to know when you need it taken out, because to him, a trash needs nothing. The trash has no needs.
Yeah.
The trash has convinced you that it needs to be taken out, but he knows better. But so he wants to take it out when you need him to take it out. And he expects that if he takes it out when you need him to take it out, he'll get the most points for having taken it out when you needed it. And if you think asking him to do that is beyond you, you know, beneath you, and that any grown man could tell when a trash needs to be taken out and do it, you know, for the good of all, then you're going to keep taking out your trash.
Yeah. I'm laughing because of course, the analogy and the resonance, but also because, you know, and I'm very aware of this. And in the last couple of years, I've had this exact conversation with my wife when it comes to the washing up. And there was a period, so for context for you, Alison, you know, as I said before, we're from New Zealand. In the middle of 2020, when COVID was quite, you know, doing its thing, we had our little daughter. And both my wife and I are from New Zealand. So we got stuck here in Australia. None of our families could come. So we decided we can pack up our lives and we can go back to New Zealand for a little bit. Hopefully not too long, enough to see the family, all that kind of stuff. And we got stuck there, borders got closed, etc. So we lived with my mother-in-law and father-in-law for a little while. And many dynamics in there, as I'm sure you can imagine. One of them was the washing up. And my wife would say to me, I need you to put that stuff away, because otherwise, you know, my mother's going to do it. This is a woman. If I put a glass down, it's gone 2 minutes later. And, you know, I had to explain, like, I'm blind to that. I don't see it. I don't see that those things need to be done. My request is that you ask me and I will do it. I will jump at it. But I need you to understand that I'm not seeking it out and I'm not seeing, my eyes don't see that. She's like, how can you not see it? I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see it. But I will do it, and nudge me and I'll happily go and do it. But I need you to understand. And, you know, there was a little bit of that, like, I need you to see it and then do it. And we kind of really had to come together on that as teammates and go, this is how I operate. I'll gladly do it. And it's funny because after that moment and that kind of situation of being around my mother-in-law and how she keeps her kitchen tidy, it actually influenced now what and how I see the kitchen quite heavily.
Interesting.
Because now I see the space.
Yes. Well, can I unpack it for you why she can't not see it?
Go for it.
So have you participated in our Understanding Women online course?
Not in the course, no.
Okay. There's a recording of the older version of the course on Audible. And it's good. I've
heard that.
You've heard that one. And that's worth doing, but it only describes women in gathering mode. And most women these days spend more time in hunting mode than in gathering mode. And we're often at war with ourselves between those two different states of mind. And it overwhelms us and kind of drives us crazy. It's hell, because hunting mode, or committed state of mind, single focus, that's a state of peace, right? Gathering mode, open, connected, right? Scan vision, seeing everything without any deadlines, just seeing what's possible, what the options are, the alternatives. That's a state of peace. But with the gatherer's perceptions, if you imagine Cave Woman goes into the meadow, and she's looking for things that are edible, that are useful, that are medicinal, right? Maybe even something that's just lovely. But something's out of place. Who moved that tree? Who put that log there? Danger! Danger! Is there a bear? What messed with my meadow? And we don't know that now, thousands and thousands of years later, something out of place, it's literally a trigger that there's a danger. Who put that there? How did that happen? And it disrupts our nervous system. Our limbic system reacts. And so we're compelled to have things be in their place. We're also compelled by line of sight. I love to rearrange and arrange furniture again and again and again. And I can have a wingback chair in the perfect place to sit in it. But it's blocking the view through the sliding glass doors where critters approach from, living in the country. I can't have that. I have to be able to see, to know. I mean, where I used to live, we had mountain lions. Where I live now, I could show you the bear paw prints on my kitchen window.
Yeah.
Right? I was less than 3 feet from a bear outside my door not long ago. And so, I mean, there's real critters. So I get to be reminded of these instincts, right?
Yeah.
And so it's why the socks on the floor bother us.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be there. They're not in the right place. Something's wrong. And it helps women to find out that in a committed state of mind, you're not ignoring anybody. Your brain is naturally screening out everything it considers irrelevant to the result you've committed yourself to. And that if it didn't, you couldn't get it done. Just like we realize we're hungry and we might not eat for 2 hours. You heard me talk about this in Understanding Women. And, the online course, we contrast it. So as a man, you can see the signs. Okay, she's in gathering mode now because of how she's speaking, how she looked up when I walked in, how she's moving her body, how she walked across the room. She's in gathering mode. And then a few minutes later, oops, what happened? She's in hunting mode now. No extraneous movements. She's just stomping across the same room. Okay, so my girl wife is gone. My man wife is here. Did she decide? Did she commit herself purposely to something? Or did somebody give her a deadline and yanked her chain? And now she has a completely different personality. And that's not my favorite. How can I get my girl back?
Yeah.
The one with the radiance and the life overflowing and the patience and the kindness and the generosity. I didn't want to marry a man. And so could we do this consciously? So, okay, you're going to be in man mode.
Flicking the switch now.
Exactly. And that's what the new Understanding, our online course, is all about. What flips it involuntarily, and what can you do as women? How can we choose how we want to be instead of being flipped? Because it happens all the time.
Yeah. And, I love the essence really here, right, is about understanding self and other, so we can really, come together as teammates to that point. There's so many threads there that I could pull. There's one, and thank
That's
you.
How it works around here.
Thank you for that. There's one, you spoke about all of a sudden almost a realization that for you, I'm emasculating men, and I'm going to learn about that. And some of the shit that I'm carrying around has led that I'm actually going to use that a bit. But then this thing of we can dominate or we can please men. And I want to touch on that because it feels like without nuance, that could be so misinterpreted, let's say. And how does, first of all, a woman hearing that perhaps reconcile the if I'm not going to dominate him and emasculate, I have to please him, right? And not perhaps fall into the idea at the very least, or maybe the behaviors of being subservient or something. And then for a guy listening to that going, okay, so my woman needs to please me maybe, and they might be missing some of the beautiful nuance in that. What does it actually look like? To give up perhaps any of those, dominating and masculine behaviors.
To give it up. Well, first, I want you to know that I've never said it that way before.
Okay.
The choices are to please or to dominate.
Yeah.
And I recognize that it's a true statement. Everything falls into those different categories, everything that women do from instinct. But one of the things that I found helps women is to find out that be in pleasing mode, which causes us to withhold information from the people who care about us, about what we really need. That's emasculating. To withhold critical information, to not speak up and say, ouch, or that doesn't work for me. And
yeah, instead, I'm fine, nothing's wrong.
Yeah, or just pretend everything's fine. And I remember early on in our intimate life with my boyfriend of almost 3 years, which we started out on the phone, like just with this commitment to communicating. And Brett really knew for both of us to make sure it was safe for the other person, and to express so much, and to honor what was true for the other person. And he asked me, he said, I'm not going to tell you what he was doing to my body, but he said, what's it like for you when I do that? And I thought about keeping the peace. I thought about saying nothing. I thought about just like smiling or shrugging, or and but then I looked at but what was true. And I said, it's annoying. He's like, well, I guess I better stop doing that. And it was the beginning. It was the beginning of this, of giving the other person actionable information. So that, I mean, seriously, I was married for 26 years. I was with my husband for 28 years. I didn't complain about our sex life. And within a month of Dan and I starting to have sex, we both acknowledged the other person was the best lover we'd ever had. And it was because of how gently honest we were with each other. And
yeah, because where would the benefit be, right? There's an idea perhaps of a benefit, which is maybe his feelings don't get hurt there or disrespected, to your point earlier, right? But then what do you do with that?
Well, but that's the thing. There's a huge difference between feelings being hurt and being disrespected. And women will do things or not do things because they're afraid of hurting a man's feelings. Not knowing that he doesn't care that much about his feelings being hurt. He cares way more about producing the result. And so if she's withholding information because she's afraid it will hurt his feelings, but the lack of that information is preventing him from scoring the touchdown, right? From getting 1,000 points, right? Or 100,000 points. Like that's, and then the fact that she doesn't trust him to be able to handle what's real for her, that's a form of disrespect. If you don't trust me, you don't respect me, you don't know who I am, you think I'm like a wimp or something, I can't take it. Does it? One man explained it to me. He said, having your feelings hurt, it's just unpleasant, but not being able to produce the results you want to produce is so much worse. And emasculation, hurting our feelings doesn't emasculate us. You emasculate us when you diminish our ability to produce results. And I got it in my bones. And all of a sudden, all the things that I'd been learning for years, when he said that, they all made sense. Do you know that when we withhold information, when we withhold acknowledgement, when we withhold appreciation, one woman, her favorite way to emasculate men was to withhold food.
Right.
Oh, good. So he doesn't even know he's hungry till he's at the breaking point. And now he's going to be the worst of himself. And you're going to withhold food, and that's going to make you feel powerful. Right. And one of the things that we saw in our workshops and how we measured the effectiveness is that on the first day, women are telling stories about how they emasculate men, and they're kind of bragging about it. And then we teach them why it doesn't work and what it's costing them, basically everything they ever wanted from men. And then what they could do to interact with men as men are, right? Like respecting single focus. And if you need to interrupt, you say, I'm sorry to interrupt. Instead of just interrupt because what he's doing you think is stupid. Of course I can interrupt. What you're doing is stupid. It's not important. You're watching TV, right? Instead of, I'm sorry to interrupt your show. Could you pause it? I have an important question to ask. Just give me a second. Wait. Yes. Okay. What? Right? I mean, if we interact that way, right? Instead of the way we normally do. And so we would, explain some of these things to men and have them start practicing what we call the language of heroes, which is what is taught in the Queen's Code, in the book, The Queen's Code, which, by the way, it took me 15 years to be able to write it, right?
Yes.
After I set out to do it. And then what was so interesting is we give them a few words in order to be able to communicate in men's language and from their desire to provide. And they'd come back the next morning and they'd be telling stories about interacting with their husbands and brothers and sons, even like a 1-year-old son, and sincerely using words like help. It would help me if you did that. Recognizing how much men want to help and being shocked. Do you know, at things they've asked him to do for years, to just say, it would help me if you did that. It would. And then they got right on it. They're like, what? And then they're telling these stories. And then when they thanked the man, they said that, and they came up with this. I never use this word. They said, and then he puffed up. He puffed up. He went like this. And I was like, so how did that make you feel? And it felt really good. Okay, well, you might want to notice that yesterday, before yesterday, when a man puffed up, it scared you and it made you mad. And you cut him off at the knees. You had to take the wind out of his sails. You couldn't stand to see him puffed up, let alone cause it and be delighted by it. And the women are like, oh my gosh. And I mean, that's how I knew I was onto something. In one day, going from attacking a man when he was like that to wanting to gift a man that feeling about himself.
And of course, what comes back, right? The letting go of this form of power versus this more empowered feeling as a result.
Right. Yeah. And that was the thing that I recognized when Ellen Hurst asked me to stop. She used the word castrate. When she asked me to stop doing it, my first reaction was, well, then how will I protect myself? And then the second thing that happened, and I described this in the Queen's Code, is I saw that every time I took a man's power, well, I had glee about it, that I could do that. It reinforced my own real feeling of weakness. It reinforced my fear that I couldn't interact with him head to head. And I had this realization, this epiphany, that as long as I was stealing men's power, I would never know a woman's power. I never would. And I said, okay, I'll stop. And I describe this experience in the book. Kimberly has this experience, and it actually happened to me. It felt like being wrapped in this cloak, this like incredibly beautiful, soft, amazing cloak of power, but a different tone of power, different vibration. And oh my gosh, it was intoxicating. And I had to find out what that was. And that's where all my courses from women come from, to give them access to our birthright. And once we own our power, we really we can just respect and admire yours. And then that's where you start getting what I call the upward spiral. Or you could call the stairway to heaven. It just gets better and better and better. And men get to be adored and women get to be cherished. And tremendous admiration being shared back and forth. Awe even. It's like, wow. And it can really be that way.
Yes.
I've seen it. I've done it with two very different men. And my son, my
Yeah.
son who called me today, check in with me. And then I mean, the Queen's Code, we know close to 100,000 people have bought the Queen's Code since it was published in 2010, which puts it in the 0.5% of all books ever.
Mm-hmm.
And but when we published it originally, we published on the internet a chapter at a time, and we didn't protect it on purpose. People could download it to their computers and print out as many copies as they wanted.
Mm.
And there's so many unauthorized translations out there, because I'm like, my mother needs this information and she only speaks Italian, Hebrew, Mandarin, French, Portuguese, Guatemalan Spanish. And it just, yeah, I mean, it's wonderful, but it's been validated by so many men who listened to or read the Queen's Code and found out how honorable your intentions are.
Mm-hmm.
And the mismatch of how women see and who men really are, and how it can get worked out. We can actually see each other and honor each other without dishonoring ourselves, which is critical.
Yes, a very important distinction, and
Yes.
yeah, very worthwhile work. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So here's something I want to ask them.
Yeah.
I heard, like so much of that beauty in your realizations and the shifts, and even as you said that one day in the workshop, like the bragging about how I emasculate to sharing something very different. To the guys that are listening, going, great, it'd be good if my partner listens to this stuff and changes how she interacts with me. What's our role in that dynamic there?
Well,
I know that's very broad, but in terms of
no, it's
she
an important
can
question.
speak our language. Okay, so what am I going to do? Because like this is really I'm pragmatic, I'm practical, no surprises.
Me too.
Right?
Me too.
So what do we? Well, for the guys, okay, I how do I meet perhaps her?
Okay, so the answer to that question is why I created the Understanding Women workshop in the first place, and then revised it when I saw how much was missing.
Yeah.
And like the original, there's no female sexuality, there's no maternal instincts, there's no why we go insane when you veto us and we think you're such a fill in the blank for vetoing us, and we don't understand where it comes from. So I recognize that men were bringing out the worst in women. That as ignorant as women are about men's instincts, men are ignorant about women's instincts. And that if we could reach towards the other person and solve the problem together of how do we not bring out the worst. But we found out, I mean, for years, we only did workshops for women, and we saved marriages, we reunited people, we saved families, they saved it, they reunited, they did the work. They had to have the courage to do something different. And then I recognized that I wasn't helping my graduates, which are all women, by not having the men that they lived with know what would cause them to emasculate them. So that's how you get this pinball, a downward spiral. He does something that he thinks should be fine, that she should be fine with it, and he doesn't know why she goes berserk. And he thinks it's ridiculous. And then how he treats it, what's wrong with you now? Which is a common response of a man when a woman's feelings are hurt. But he doesn't know how he hurt her feelings. And when he finds out, women emasculate men because they're scared of them, I'm not scary. Seriously? You're terrifying.
Yeah, different sort, maybe.
Well, what most men don't know is, to a woman with these ancestral memories and instincts to react to it, we don't know that to us, a raised voice precedes a raised fist. we think those are connected.
Mm.
And so a man could have never touched us in anger, could have never touched us with the intent to hurt us, even with intent to control us, may have never done that. He raises his voice and we have a cavewoman attack. And we will either fight, we'll attack him, or we'll flee, we'll get out of there as fast as we can, or we'll freeze. And we might put a mask on our frozen face, and we're just keeping the peace. We're just hoping this stops soon. And the thing is, Mike, he doesn't even have to be yelling at us. My husband yelled at his computer on a regular basis, cussed it out. And I would be so on edge until I learned, just leave the house.
Yeah.
You can do that. I could work on managing my limbic system reaction, or I could just remove myself. And it's funny, when a woman keeps leaving when you raise your voice and you don't want her to leave, I have men who have learned how to not raise their voices. They've just learned to not do that. No, this isn't going to go well. Calm down, take a breath, get yourself together, come back when you can represent yourself calmly. It's never going to turn out if I yell, because it never turns out.
Yeah.
So recognizing that, I mean, you could think of it like this. We literally have conflicting instincts. Opposite comes from the word opposing, right? So how a woman preserves feeling safe interrupts what a man's doing to feel secure. And so now you have two people who aren't safe and are bringing out the worst in each other. But if you start to notice it, right, instead of clashing, you can make these slight adjustments. Like women in an open state of mind don't need transition time. We're literally in a state of disruption, in a state of interruption all the time. So we don't need to transition to a new focus because we're not focused in the first place. So a man walks in the door and we hand the child to him. But I like to picture a caveman. He's come home, he's got to throw down the deer that he got for the whole tribe. He's got to take off the bloody clothes.
Yeah.
He's got to, before that, he's going to set down his spear, laptop, iPhone, whatever it is. But if women watch men come home, you'll see that they always do the same thing. They set down their implements. They change their clothes. And then they did this thing that this amazing man, he gave me the word for it. You change the data feed. So you go pay attention to something that requires nothing of you.
Yep.
It's not holding you to account for anything. My husband would read a motorcycle magazine. And that would shift him from all the things he worried about as a corporate controller, an officer of a huge company. And then he would shift into being at home with his wife and kids, which he left the huge company and all the perks of being an officer because he had to keep going across the country once a month for a week. And he's like, no, I want to see my children every day and sleep with my wife every night. Whoa. People would think, really? A man's going to choose that? He totally chose that. But he also, when he got home, me and his girls would go, it's home. And then we'd just fade away and go back to what we were doing until he completed his transition time and came to us, present, and going, so how was your day? Instead of glazed over, it's like, I got to get all these clothes. That simple adjustment, transition time, it's saved lives.
Yeah, and I know it, and myself, and I've seen that as well, because I know, obviously a lot of men aren't connected to that need, right? And they don't know that there's this thing going on here, and then we try and juggle the things, and then she's at me, and all the things that maybe then all of a sudden, the opposing forces keep clashing.
Yeah, you don't hold the boundary. If you just give this, I can be everything you want me to be.
Yeah.
Or not recognizing, not only do men not recognize their own need for transition time, they don't recognize other men's needs for transition time. And we were on a road trip, and we arrived, and my husband said, Jeff, up and at him. Jeff had been sleeping the entire time. So now Jeff's waking up. He's looking around. He's realizing we're getting out and going pee. Okay, I want to do that. I got to put my shoes on. But he's moving at a snail's pace.
Yeah.
Like, honey, he's a man. He needs transition time. Well, I didn't need transition time. Yes, you do. You knew we were almost there.
Yeah, yours was different.
Stop talking. You stopped talking 10 minutes ago because you were transitioning. And I stopped talking to you because I recognized you were. Oh.
I love this. Okay, I'm very aware of the time. For those of you listening off camera, we were talking about Alison. You've done so well. You haven't fallen asleep, and I know that sounds so condescending, just referencing our conversation. I want to ask you this. I'm interested to see what you say to this, and it could be a conversation that goes on for days. So the invitation is to perhaps be broad on it. If you Alison Armstrong,
soundbite.
if you could, insert, let's say, or influence key educational content into schools on relationship dynamics, where would you, what would you ensure was included? Because, you know, like obviously in the simplest form, I recognize all the things I now know, you know, and of course am yet to know. I didn't learn any of this when I was at an age where it would have been really helpful. So if we could actually put this stuff into schools, where would we go?
Well, one of the things that schools don't like, but it doesn't make it not true.
I think there's a few of those.
Is that people learn more by watching than they do by listening. So how a teacher interacts with their students is modeling something that means way more than the rules and the punishments. And so if I were going to put something into schools, it would be to start partnering with young people in their education. And years ago, I did a course for the middle school teachers and administrators in my town. And I called it Gender Differences in Education. And the principal was there. And years later, he was telling me what happened to him when he found out how much girls need to feel liked by their teachers, or they think they can't ever succeed. And how boys don't care about being liked. Boys care about, is this worth doing? Right? How am I going to use this? It doesn't matter. Just get it done. It's on the test. That's counter-instinctual, especially teenagers. Teenagers don't want to stay at home because they're not learning anything at home about how to survive. Right? So they just, they go home to rest and eat. When I recognized that about my son, I stopped trying to keep him home to spend time with me. Instead, I said, can I give you a ride? Where do you need to go? Can I give you a ride? So, I mean, I think, and I'm a terrible rebel about this, and
Jeez.
I mean, my daughters were 13 and 10 and a half when I individually sat them down and realized how my older daughter's school was literally making her physically ill. And the barbaric way that people behaved in schools. And my younger daughter just wanted to learn everything, right? And I sat them down and said, okay, it's your education. It's your life and it's your education. And I want to know how you want to go about it and how I can support it. And Claire immediately tried all these different things, alternatives, life schooling, unschooling, this thing here in Colorado. She went to live in Colorado where you invent your own curriculum and you have a committee of people who give you your diploma, and you hire your own teachers. The state provides money to hire your own teachers. And my youngest daughter, and she doesn't remember, she swears she didn't say this, but oh well. She said, I recognize that public education, I recognize that public school is an inefficient way to get an education, but I want to be with my friends. And I said, okay, I'll support you. We'll buy you uniforms. We'll get the stuff you need for projects. We'll get you to school, make you lunch. I'll support you. And I mean, she was class valedictorian. She graduated summa cum laude from one of the top schools. And one of her teachers said, I wish everyone was like her. And I thought in my head, well, she's probably the only person who's here by choice every day. Because I stopped making them go to school. They could play hooky, they could have I just say, okay, just if you're going to stay home from school, just don't turn up the TV too loud because I have to get work done. And Olivia figured out it was easier to go to school and do all her homework while she was sitting in the boring class with the teachers that she had to take care of their egos because they explain things so poorly. So she figured out how to ask a question in a way that would explain the material to all the other kids without the teacher knowing she had just done that.
Yeah.
And then the kids are like, oh, thank goodness, right? Oh my goodness. But yeah, I'm for choice in education. And I think young people, I think one of the worst things that we do is we protect them from making mistakes. We protect them from failure. And so they turn 18, at least here in the US, they turn 18. They're now legally responsible. They're being held responsible for everything they do. And they weren't given any freedom to make choices before that where they could blow it. And then, experience the consequences. I mean, if my kids, I stopped making my kids do homework. It's not my job to manage your homework. You get to experience the consequences of not doing homework. That's organic, right? Yeah. Consequences are organic. Punishment is invented. So I literally could talk about this forever. I started this morning. I started this morning with a podcast called Moms Like Us, wanting to know about all the gender confusion and what to do to instill in boys, to be men. And like, well, if you teach them to understand and honor themselves, they'll work it out. They will work it out on their own. We can't, this isn't something that can be decided politically or morally who people be. We try, but we never set people free on their own path to figure out who the heck they are.
Yeah.
And wives do it to husbands, right? You learned about knights and princes, and wives try to control who this man's becoming. It never works out in the long run. He's going to return to himself sooner or later.
Yep.
Anyhow, I can't give a short answer to this. I taught so many teachers to teach our material everywhere from preschool into college curriculums. And it helps. It helps to understand and
well, yeah.
We got to be curious. I think if we just did one thing, be curious. So when the men come to you and say something's got to change, okay, let's get curious about what's really happening here. And curious comes from the Greek word that means to care. It's huge.
Beautiful.
So,
and it's exactly what I heard in your response to the frog farmer comment, which was, really all about curiosity, and it led you on a pretty important and profound path Alison. So thank you for your curiosity and going on that path and sharing so generously all of your knowledge and also with us today. You are someone I admire greatly and appreciate your work immensely. So thank you so much. You absolute legend.
Wow. This was fun. Let's do it again.
Sure. I've got about 14 more questions we didn't even get near. Alison, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Good day to you. I guess that's what you say in Australia, but you say something different as in Kiwi, right? You say, darn, she taught me and I can't remember. What do they say? They don't say
what this is. Okay, I'm going to give you a word to say which will just satisfy me a little bit more. Right?
Okay.
And it's chur. As if you were going to say church, but you didn't say the CH on the end.
Sure. What does it mean? Sure. Is that Maori?
Chur is a very New Zealand colloquial term that means a few things. It means hello, it means yes, it means thanks, it means great. Yeah. And
sure.
I think it's not many people know it or use it. It sneaks in every now and then. I've been gone from the country for a while, so it doesn't come out. But I can imagine, you can ask. I don't know if that was probably the term, but it brings me a smile.
It wasn't. I would have remembered. It was something. It wasn't. It was something not that different, but it also was used for hello and goodbye. But anyhow, someday, it's on my list of dreams to sail the east coast of Australia from top to bottom or bottom to top, depending what time of year we go.
Wow. That
it
sounds
could happen.
Wonderful. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Could. It
must.
You
again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Be well.
You too?
Sure.
What a way to end it.